Opera is big in the Romantic era. And I don't just mean this figuratively, although opera certainly is extraordinarily popular during the 19th century. I also mean this literally. Opera gets bigger and bigger throughout the course of the Romantic era. The sets become bigger and more elaborate, the acts become longer, opera choruses become larger. All aspects of opera explode. Let's take a look at some early 19th century opera that set the stage, literally and figuratively, for what happens later in the Romantic era. We'll begin by looking at Italian opera composers like Rossini, Bellini, and Donizetti. Prominent opera composers in France include Bizet and Meyerbeer, and in Germany we have Carl Maria von Weber. In the late 19th century, we have composers like Richard Wagner, Verdi, and Puccini that come to prominence, but we'll get to them in just a little bit. We'll begin with Rossini in Italy. His early work included The Italians in Algiers, which established his reputation. There was also The Barber of Seville, which was his most successful work, and William Tell, his last opera. His operas frequently blended characteristics of both opera buffa, the comic opera of Italy, and opera seria, the serious opera of Italy. He served first as the music director of the Teatro San Carlo in Naples, which began in 1815, and later moved to Paris to become the director of the Théâtre Italien. From about 1830 on, he wrote no more operas but became a gourmand instead, living off the royalties and the money that he had made early in his career. Rossini is famous for writing in a bel canto style. This literally translates as beautiful singing. It implies a practice of lyrical writing that utilizes effortless vocal technique with florid, that means flowery and ornamented delivery. Melody here is the most important element. To this end, Rossini's orchestrations are usually quite light, supporting the voice with occasional solo instruments for color. Here we'll listen to Una voce poco fa, sung by Beverly Sills and appearing in The Barber of Seville, which was written in 1816. The translation is, "A voice has just echoed here into my heart. My heart is already wounded, and it was Lindoro who shot," one of the other characters. "Yes, Lindoro will be mine. I've sworn it, I'll win." Listen to the florid delivery, the emphasis on melody, and the easy-sounding technique with which Sills delivers this ornamented aria. It will be lightly accompanied by the orchestra. Here we go.
Una voce
We turn now to Bellini, who comes to prominence after Rossini retires. Bellini composes 10 operas, including La Sonnambula, The Sleepwalker, Norma, and I Puritani. In his operas, he prefers action and drama to comedy. Thus, he continues the trend of building action into arias. In other words, action continues to not just be reserved for recitative, but gets woven in to the aria. Remember that from the early Baroque, action occurred in the recitative, and meditation on that action occurred in the aria. As we move through the classical era, we start to see some blending. And as we continue into the Romantic era, we really see that drama is allowed. Dramatic action can occur within arias. Bellini's melodies are characterized by long, sweeping lines, which contrast the relatively shorter and wittier gestures in Rossini, like what we just heard. Note also the use of the chorus in Costa Diva, which we'll listen to now, which is from Norma, here used to underscore the action. Here we have music sung in the midst of a druidic ceremony. The text is, "Pure goddess, whose silver covers these sacred ancient plants, we turn to your lovely face, unclouded and without veil." Donizetti is another prominent composer in Italy at the time. He creates an outpouring of works, including over 70 operas, 100 songs, and several symphonies. Some of his famous operas include Lucia di Lammermoor, The Daughter of the Regiment, which was an opera comique, and Don Pasquale, an opera buffa. One technique that Donizetti uses is averting cadences. That means avoiding a final cadence that draws a scene to an end. In this way, he creates extended scenes to avoid applause, allowing dramatic scenarios to work themselves out. One such example is the mad scene from Lucia di Lammermoor, performed here by Nathalie Dessay. Here's what's happening in the midst of this opera. Lucia has been forced to marry against her will. It is the night of her wedding There is a party downstairs, and she and her new husband are upstairs. She goes mad and kills him. We then see her come out from the room, covered in blood, and speaks to the man that she actually loves. In the midst of this scene, you'll hear some interesting orchestrational effects. In one case, you'll hear a glass harmonica, a ghostly sounding instrument. The principle behind a glass harmonica is the same as when you take a crystal glass and wet your finger and rub it, and it causes it to resonate. A glass harmonica is simply many crystal bowls on a spool that are turned by the feet, by a treadle. They pass through water, and you play them almost like a keyboard. The glass harmonica had an association with madness. For a long time, crystal would include high amounts of lead. Thus, it was very easy for those playing it to have lead poisoning. The glass harmonica was supposed to induce seizures. Likely what was actually happening was the effect of playing it and having lead poisoning was interpreted as creating seizures. Nonetheless, what we have here is a link to some sort of mental distress and this sound. And we hear it here in Lucia di Lammermoor. Listen to not only that, but how as soon as we land upon a cadence, when we do, Donizetti immediately bounces off that cadence and continues on with the scene. In France, two of the popular opera genres were grand opera and opera comique. In grand opera, we include spectacle as an integral part of the production. Here we mean spectacle as something that is a feast for the eyes. It might include machinery, ballets, choruses, or crowd scenes that give a sense of immensity to the experience and to the plot. One such work was Les Huguenots by Meyerbeer. It included 5 acts, a large cast, a dramatic and tragic story with scenery and lighting to match. Here is opera getting bigger. Although Meyerbeer was of German birth, he utilizes Italian, and French styles, and is commissioned by some of the leading opera houses in France. Opera comique, on the other hand, uses spoken dialogue instead of recitative, and is lighter. It requires few singers, and was usually a comedy or just a semi-serious drama, particularly influenced by the Italian opera buffa and the bel canto style. To get a sense of what grand opera is like, let's take a listen to a little bit of Les Huguenots by Meyerbeer, and we'll get a sense of just how big opera has really gotten. During the early 19th century in Germany, one of the prominent opera composers was Carl Maria von Weber. In Germany at this time, operas integrated elements from other regions, for instance, spectacle from French opera or singing styles from Italy. There was little really original stylistic change that was coming out of German opera, at least in the early part of the Romantic era. What they were interested in was creating a national tradition that was characterized by an emphasis on the folk, the ordinary people, frequently with the presence of mysterious or supernatural powers. Weber's enduring opera Der Freischütz, or The Free Shooter, alternately The Magic Rifleman, incorporates these plot elements. In the Wolfsglen scene, which I will provide a link to, Zamiel, the Dark Huntsman, or a demon, is summoned by Max, who has recently lost a shooting competition with a lowly peasant boy. You'll hear the summoning of this demonic presence, surrounded by music of the night, and not in a pretty way, but in a very creepy way. I don't include the video here because it has some suggestive themes to it, so I provide you the link so that you can decide whether you would like to go see it on your own. The presentation will continue with an emphasis on the composers of the late 19th century.